Hi guys, welcome to the last part of chapter 9. Um, just a quick aside, in case you have a AP exam on your quiz day this Wednesday, or your quiz day next Thursday, or your test day on Friday, it does not remove the responsibility from you to let me know in advance of your quiz or test that you have it and to reschedule with me. No, I do not expect you to take a quiz or test on the same day that you have an AP. However, you do still have the responsibility to reach out to me and let me know that you will not be taking your quiz or test during your allotted time. So, having said that, let's get into talking about offenses against the sixth and ninth commandments. Um, when we're talking about this, we're really just talking about um, the reality that actions like masturbation, fornication, pornography, prostitution, rape, and homosexual activity uh, can be occasions to sin. In fact, most of them are always inherently sinful. We're also going to briefly address, or at least you'll read, hopefully, on pages 226 to 232 in your textbook, um, some pretty practical ways to avoid um, getting caught up in sexual activity, premarital sexual activity, and maybe perhaps even create your own list of ways in which you can work to avoid activities that tempt you into doing stuff that you know you were not supposed to be doing because it is not the proper moral context for you to be doing it in. And as far as that goes, a couple of things that you should take out of what we're talking about today. First and foremost, when we talk about sins against the sixth and the ninth commandment, we're talking about sins against chastity. And when we talk about sins against chastity, we are almost always going to be talking about lust. So when we talk about these sins against chastity, we have to recognize that lust engenders actions that are contrary to the virtue of chastity. Um, we have a responsibility, each of us as human beings, to find ways to draw the line so that we don't lose control of our lives in the area of sexuality. Hopefully, you can understand the similarity but also difference between adultery and fornication. Both of them are violations of the exclusive aspect of the marital act and of marriage. But the difference between the two of them, adultery is committed by someone who is married, right? Fornication is committed by somebody who is not married. In both cases, they're having sex with someone, but in both cases, they're having sex with someone they should not be having sex with. Okay. In the case of fornication, it's an unmarried person. They shouldn't be having sex with anyone. In the case of the married person, the only person they should be having sex with is their spouse. And either one, right? Either fornication or adultery are a serious violation of God's plan for the happiness and fulfillment of the human person. And the expression of marital love in and through and exclusively to one's spouse. You should know by the time we're done that sexual sins like masturbation and the use of pornography are contrary to God's plan for sexuality, because in both cases, they almost always aim to achieve solitary sexual stimulation. And what you should realize at this point, given what we've talked about as far as the sacrament of marriage, as far as what we've talked about in terms of the sacredness of sex, is that it is an experience that is meant for not a singular person, but for two to become one, right? And so something that is seeking singular sexual pleasure is going to be sinful, all right? We should also be aware that prostitution and rape are also serious violations against the gift of sexuality that God has given us, albeit in different ways. In addition, rape is not just a violation of the sixth and ninth commandments, but also actually the fifth as well, as you are violating the inherent human dignity of the person. We will come back to that in just a bit. And we also definitely need to take a little bit of time talking about the church's teaching in regards to homosexual attraction versus homosexual activity. How one, attraction, is not inherently sinful, although disordered, where the other is always inherently intrinsically disordered, right? And since it's intrinsically disordered, it is going to be sinful, and that's the acts. Okay, we'll come back to that in a second. We'll start out by talking about masturbation really quickly. No need to really get into what it is. Your textbook gives you a definition on page 226. What you need to know about it being not good for you is, first and foremost, sex is not meant, again, to be a solo activity purely for sexual gratification. Sexual pleasure is part and parcel of what goes on in the sex act, but again, the two purposes for it, the unitive and the procreative, have to be present for any sexual activity to be morally licit. And there's no unitive when it comes to masturbation. It's just one person, not two becoming one. Some other kind of issues with it is that it can become habit forming, i.e. addictive. It can lead to sexual obsession. It can lead to a devaluing of the personhood of the object, of the kind of fantasy, etc. And then it ties right into pornography, right? Pornography comes from the Greek words meaning writing about prostitutes. Graphy, Graphy, means to write. The porno part at the beginning means prostitute. So that's where we got it from. And it obviously comes from people used to write about the exploits of prostitutes. What do prostitutes do? Well, they have sex for money, right? So we'll get to prostitution in a second, but let's focus on pornography for a second. Pornography is objectification. It is turning what is a sacred act into an object for mere sexual pleasure, sexual gratification. There's a whole lot of other stuff that's wrong with it in terms of chemical and biological function. It affects those that become kind of hooked on it, if you will, addicted, or whatever kind of terminology you want to use. There have been numerous studies that have shown how the brain gets rewired in terms of stimulus, and it oftentimes leads to PIDE. And for many of you who don't know what the acronym means. It means porn-induced erectile dysfunction. So yes, it affects men. It actually affects really young men. Men as young as the age of 15 have been diagnosed with PIDE in the world that we live in. So yes, porn is harmful. I think a lot of people are under the impression that pornography does not harm, when in fact it harms in a number of ways, not least of all the people that participate. White slavery is actually a thing in terms of sexual slavery, things like that, people getting addicted to drugs, all sorts of stuff. Porn is harmful, period, the end. So porn hurts in many different ways, and you should probably be thinking about some of the ways in which you, as a participant in terms of watching it, are participating in its continued existence and continued evil that it does in the world. Fornication is simply sex outside of marriage by someone who is unmarried. So premarital sex is sometimes another way of describing fornication. And fornication, again, is sex outside of its proper context, which is in marriage, which is one of the reasons that it's sinful, and not too different, not too unlike masturbation. It is often done for personal sexual gratification, satisfaction, pleasure, etc., and often does leave one or both of the participants doing so in a way that uses the other person as an object of gratification. So it can be very dehumanizing. And the reason that happens is because the reality of what this act expresses, the unity, right, and the exclusiveness, the permanence, right, is not present, right? So it is two people that are lying to each other physically. Okay, I'm going back to the theology of the body, and if you want more information about that, I'll be happy to give you some more information about it. Your textbook also talks about rape quite a bit on page number 238. And there's so much that could be said about rape. I'm not going to go into it too much, except to say this: it is an intrinsic evil. It is often, while it involves the forcing of sex on another, it is often not necessarily about sex or even lust, but more about power. And that's why it also happens to be a violation of the fifth commandment. You are taking away someone's ability to choose their free will, what it is to be human, and forcing yourself upon them. Another reason why it's inherently sinful. Now, having said that, I think it's important that we understand the vast majority of rapes happen in what is known as acquaintance rape. That is, it's somebody that you know, right? When it happens, it is often someone that is known, not necessarily a friend, but certainly someone that is known. Acquaintance rape is sometimes referred to as date rape. Now, that being said, there are steps that you can take to help you be safe. And you can find them on page number 238 at the bottom. I'm going to just kind of give them to you because they're really just self-explanatory, smart things that you should be incorporating into your lives anyway. Number one, avoid blind dates, right? If you don't know the person, guess what? You shouldn't be spending time alone with somebody that you don't know. Makes sense, right? So you should probably try dating in large groups, not least of all because it will help you avoid the temptation of being alone with somebody that you might be doing stuff with that you probably shouldn't be doing stuff with. Okay. The second one, plan the specifics of your date beforehand. That's just common sense, right? Let people know where you're going to be. Periodically check in with them, right? So that they can make sure that you're safe. The third one, stay out of each other's homes if no one else is there. That's just another general good rule of thumb. You want to protect yourself. You want to protect them too. And make sure that there are people around that can step in if necessary in these situations. So that's, again, just a generally smart thing to think about. Number 4, dress modestly and avoid sexually suggestive movies and conversation. Again, that's not just necessarily about avoiding and preventing date rape, but that's just helpful for modesty's sake, right? And cultivating the virtue of modesty to help you be pure of heart and be chaste. The fifth one, don't drink or do drugs. Again, seems kind of self-explanatory, but you as a human being have those great gifts of free will and reason. Don't do things that impair them. Don't do things that will make it harder for you to exert your free will, your choice, your reason. Number 6, avoid parking in make-out locales. I laugh because, it's just such a kind of cliche, but at the same time, again, it's one of those things. Avoid going to places where you can get in trouble, right? Where situation can be misconstrued. You can get yourself in a situation where maybe you are saying yes one minute and no the next, and stuff can happen. So just, again, avoid those situations altogether where confusion or, even worse, manipulation can happen. Okay? And the next one, number 7, say no strongly and firmly. Again, it seems kind of ridiculous, but your no means no, right? And you need to voice it. You need to, if necessary, exert your no physically, right? To protect yourself, because you are amazing and do not deserve to be treated as anything other than the amazing human being that you are. And the the eighth and final one that your textbook gives you, and this is certainly by no means an exhaustive list. I know that you guys can come up with some on your own, some other good ways to avoid these type of situations. But the last one that your textbook mentions is recognize pressuring dialogue that can lead to forced sex. And it gives you some examples. Pressuring dialogue. You do it if you love me, right? That's manipulating. It's manipulative. Everyone's doing it. Not true, right? That's false. And who are you saving it for? Hopefully your future spouse, that person that you want to give yourself completely and totally to, and give that gift, that complete gift of self to them. Okay. The last thing that we're going to talk about before we get into your questions, your final questions for chapter 9, is homosexual activity and homosexual attraction. First and foremost, when we talk about attraction, attraction is not necessarily chosen, right? No one chooses necessarily their attractions. Now, we can choose to act on them, and that includes our minds in terms of we can choose to ideate, that is to kind of those desires, those temptations that we have, we can choose to dwell on them, we can choose to continue to think on them, fantasize about them, etc. That is an action, and that is sinful, right? So I got news for you guys. Heterosexual fantasies like that are also sinful, right? The attractions in and of themselves, not, right? But the choice to dwell upon them and to fantasize and to kind of give into those desires, those lustful temptations is sinful, right? Actions are always sinful. Okay, homosexual actions are always going to be sinful because they are intrinsically disordered. And what does it mean when I say disordered? They don't lead to what the purposes of sex are. Again, the unitive and the procreative. And so that's why, right? They are not ordered in terms of the nature of human beings, the complementary words, the complementarianess of man and woman. It doesn't exist, right? It can't exist in a same-sex relationship in terms of the strengths and weaknesses that men and women possess and fill in for each other. And so that's why an action is sinful. And I'll come back to that question in just a bit. Now let's take a look at the questions on page 239 in your textbook and the questions in your Unit 8 packets. Your Unit 8 questions. The first one asks, why is masturbation wrong? And again, I mentioned this earlier, but masturbation seeks pleasure for its own sake, right? That's contrary to God's intention for sexual activity, which of course is to be relational, right? i.e., two becoming one, right? It's meant to be shared with a person of the opposite sex in a lifelong commitment that is open to life and the sharing of mutual love, i.e., unitive and procreative, okay, part of an indissoluble marriage that is exclusive. Second question, define fornication, discuss several guidelines that would help a couple avoid this sin. This is a good question, right? First part's pretty easy. Fornication is sexual intercourse engaged in by unmarried people, i.e. at least one of the people is unmarried. So if you have a married person having sex with an unmarried person, for the married person it's adultery, the unmarried person it's fornication. So it's sexual activity by someone that's not married. Okay, fair enough, easy. Now, generally speaking, when we talk about premarital sex, both parties are unmarried, so for both parties it's fornication, and that's really what we're going to talk about here. What are some things that you can do to avoid having sex with another person? Well, these are pretty simple kind of methods to think about, like avoid things that are going to tempt you, like prolonged kissing, right? Don't touch another person's private parts. It seems pretty self-explanatory. If you're not doing those things, it's going to be difficult to have sex, right? Keep your clothes on. Remember that oral sex is also fornication, right? When you are around your boyfriend, girlfriend, whomever, and you become aroused, like, stop doing what you're doing. Find something else to do. Go away, right? Again, seems pretty self-explanatory. It kind of boils down to this. You shouldn't be involved in any type of physical relationship unless or until you are truly ready to contemplate marriage. And even then, you want to avoid situations that are going to tempt you, right? So you're going to want to kind of draw a line and have a line that you're comfortable with, that your potential dating spouse, right? That's what the purpose of dating is. You date to find the person you want to marry, is comfortable with as well, right? You might want to draw the line at some stuff as simple as like hand holding. I know I seem old fashioned when I say it, but it's smart, right? Hugs that don't get too physical, right? Light kissing, etc. Be smart, right? Understand yourself, know yourself, begin to know your partner, or begin to know the person that you're attracted to, and find where you can be comfortable without putting yourselves into tempting situations. Third question. What is the intent of pornography? Why is it immoral? The sole motivation of pornography is to cause sexual arousal, right? It's to stimulate and to titillate. And its purpose is to show sexual acts outside of and apart from, distinct from the intimacy of marriage. And what it does is it depersonalizes the acts themselves for the arousal, stimulation of others. In its very nature, it disrespects and damages the dignity of the people that watch it, the people that participate in it, the people that sell it, right? It is a suck, if you will, on the dignity of humanity. Every person that is involved in its production, creation, and consumption. And so it is bad, right? And it also leads to things like rape, masturbation, fornication, etc., etc. It's not a good thing, right? Number 4, who is harmed by prostitution and why? Both the people that participate in it, as far as the people who accept money for sex, and those who pay for it, because they're treating sex as an object to be purchased rather than as what it's called to be, which is an expression of mutual love within the marital covenant relationship. And so it damages the institution, the sacrament of marriage, in the sense that it kind of cheapens what it's supposed to be and what it stands for. But of course, it also wrecks and damages the human dignity of the participants in it. Okay. Now, when I say it damages the sacrament of marriage, it doesn't actually damage it in terms of what it does for us and what it is, but it damages our ability to understand as human beings what it is and what it does for us. Number 5, define rape. Why is it intrinsically evil? Rape is the forcing of another person into having sex. It's intrinsically evil because it violates the sexuality of another person. It violates the dignity of another person, because all of us are children of God. And when you are exerting your will over another person like that, you are not treating them as the child of God that they are. Number 6, I already answered that. You can find the answer on page 228. Discuss several rules to help prevent date rape. My suggestion to you, what I would ask you to do, is just add 2 of your own, right? 2 that are completely separate from the 8 that you find on page 238, 228. And what would you suggest, right? That's really what I'm looking for that one. Number 7, why is homosexual orientation not sinful? That is, homosexual attraction. And the answer is there's very little choice. We have little choice in what we're attracted to. No one is morally guilty for who they are or for their attractions. We become morally guilty for what we do with those attractions, which leads us right into question number 8. Why are homosexual acts sinful? And again, just to underscore this reality, homosexual acts are sinful the way premarital or extramarital sexual activity is wrong, right? They are in some way, shape, or form denying the procreative or the unitive, in the case of homosexual activity, both, nature of sex that can only take place within the context of marriage. Okay. And finally, the ninth question in this batch, and the last one for chapter 9. How should a Christian relate to homosexual persons? And again, I mean, it seems so obvious to me. First and foremost, I think we have a problem in terms of labeling people as homosexual persons. For me personally, a person's a person, and that's how I relate to them. And how do I relate to them? Every person I meet, I treat hopefully as a brother or sister, because that's what they are. And that's no different for someone who has homosexual attraction. We are called to love them as brother and sister. They are, as every person you hopefully encounter and you begin to understand, beautiful people with dignity that deserve respect and love. And that's exactly how we're supposed to treat every person we encounter. I think part of our problem that we have as a culture is this idea that we identify ourselves by our attractions. Like, most people don't go around saying, oh, I'm a heterosexual. Like, most people go around saying, I'm a person. And hopefully more people start to do that. Instead of identify themselves by these things that are a part of who we are, look at the whole picture of who you are. You're a person, right? And hopefully that's how we begin to look at everyone around us. And it doesn't just go for sexual orientation, it goes for race, ethnicity, all those other things that we often use to divide ourselves from what we actually are, which is brothers and sisters, human beings, children of God, made in his image and likeness, meant to love each other in the deepest way that we're called to, in terms of that recognition of inherent human dignity that we all possess. So that's it. If you have questions about your quiz on Wednesday, if you have an AP test on Wednesday, certainly contact me right away. You know what to do. You know the email address. If you like the video, click like. If you didn't like it, let me know what I can do to make it better for you. That's all I got for you tonight. Have a good one. See ya. Bye.